Hello, welcome to BM6611 Managing Brands and our session on leveraging secondary associations. As always, you can stop and start this video as often as you like, but please make sure you go through all the slides and listen to my narration before you come to the classes on this topic. Your reading for this week is another paper by Kevin Lane Keller. This time it's Brand Synthesis, the Multidimensionality of Brand Knowledge. And Keller published that in 2003 in the Journal of Consumer Research. And as usual, you can find a link through to the paper through my reading list on Canvas. And there are two other papers for you to read on this topic of leveraging secondary associations. One by Neumeier et al., which is about co-branding, and a paper from the 1990s by Till, which is still very, very relevant today, which looks at the method of leveraging secondary associations. It uses celebrity endorsers. So, what do we mean by secondary associations and how do we leverage them? Well, we need to go back to our understanding of brand equity. And if you remember, one implication of the customer-based brand equity framework is that the manner in which these all-important brand associations are formed doesn't really matter. So, of course, most of the time, these brand associations will be formed by the company's activities itself, the way it positions the brand, the points of parity and points of difference that are created, the brand elements that are used to bring the brand to life, the advertising that is carried out, and so on. These are the primary vehicles through which brand associations are formed. But brand associations can be formed in other ways. And one clever way of doing that is to link a brand to external entities like places or people or particular retailers or events, and use what we know about that secondary entity to bring back and reflect associations onto the brand. So when we talk about leveraging secondary associations, the word secondary is used because here the associations are being created through something secondary to or external to the brand itself that we choose to link with and make something of in our brand positioning and in our brand marketing programs. This diagram comes from the Keller paper, and it's the framework that we're going to use in this session to look at all of the different types of secondary entity with which a brand may be linked. And we're going to look at it in the way of a sort of a clock diagram. We're going to start at the top with other brands and look at how brands can link themselves to other brands, external other brands, to build associations. Then we'll look at places, then we'll look at things, then we'll look at people, and then we'll lastly look at things. So not quite clockwise round. We're going to look at other brands, places, people, and then things. So keep this diagram in mind, and you may want to stop the video and flip back to it from time to time just to refresh your memory. But this is the overarching framework which sets out all of the different types of secondary entity that we can associate a brand with. So this slide simply summarises what was on the diagram before. Brand associations can be created from linkages to other external entities, such as countries of origin, distribution channels, characters, real or imaginary, celebrities, events, and so on and so forth. Here is Keller's customer-based brand equity pyramid. So where does leveraging secondary associations fit into this pyramid? Well, it fits in two key places. First of all, at level 2, meaning. And we can use secondary entities to transfer associations which relate to the meaning of the brand, either to its performance or to its imagery. So if we look at performance on the left, the example that has popped up here is a new brand of mobile phone, STK, not well known in the United Kingdom, and therefore overtly using or partnering with John Lewis, the very well-known British retailer. So the idea here is that the performance associations which we associate with John Lewis, reliability, dependability, quality, are transferred to this unknown mobile phone brand. If John Lewis is stocking it, it must be, by definition, reliable, dependable, and quality. On the right, we can see how an imagery association can be transferred from a secondary entity to a brand. In this case, the brand is Pirelli motor tyres, and the secondary entity is Formula One. Now, although we're not all going to turn into Formula One drivers driving Formula One cars if we put Pirelli tyres on our car, nonetheless, what is being intended here is that some of that Formula One glamour, excitement and power, that imagery of intense power and skill in driving is transferred to the Pirelli brand. So perhaps if you do have Pirelli tyres in your car when you drive it, then a little bit of that Formula One glamour and excitement can potentially rub off onto you and your car. Now, the second part of the pyramid, where secondary association leveraging is fundamentally important, is at level 3, response. And here we can use secondary entities to transfer associations that relate to judgments that we make about a brand, particularly its credibility, and the feelings that we have towards a brand. And we'll look at those in more detail as we move through the session. Now, there are some criteria, some issues that need to be taken into consideration when considering leveraging secondary associations onto a brand. The extent to which secondary associations will transfer successfully from the brand, from the secondary entity to the brand, is dependent on a number of characteristics. First of all, our awareness and our knowledge of the secondary entity. If it's something that we don't know, the target customer doesn't really know, hasn't heard of, then the transference won't happen. There's nothing to transfer. So you need to pick a secondary entity which is known to the target market, where they're aware of it, they recognize it, recall it, and know something about it. Secondly, the extent to which associations can be leveraged from the secondary entity back to a brand in a successful manner depends on how meaningful the knowledge of the secondary entity is in relation to the brand. In other words, is there any kind of logical fit between them? Do they have the same kind of image or personality? Does the secondary entity have a connection with the brand? Are they from the same part of the world? Is there some relevant fit? The greater the fit, the more meaningful the connection between the secondary entity and the brand, and the more effective the transfer of secondary associations will be. Secondly, when we think about meaningfulness, we have to be aware of something known as cue overload. And this is where a secondary entity is already perhaps associated with other brands or with other things. And there's just so many bits of information going on, so many connections with other entities, that the chances of any meaningful association coming back to the brand in question is actually quite small. Then we need to think about how possible it is to make these sort of attributions between the secondary entity and the brand, how feasible it is to actually transfer knowledge of the secondary entity to the brand. Can we do that in advertising? Can we show the secondary entity and the brand together? Well, that's quite easy to do if the secondary entity is a celebrity, for example. But if it's an event, or if it's a cause, a charitable cause, or a social responsibility cause, it's a bit more difficult to showcase it. So there are logistical issues which need to be taken into consideration. And all of these things on the slide here come together to really colour and shape how successful the transference will be. Now, at the bottom of the slide, there's a hyperlink to an example of a brand partnership, which was relatively recently ended. The brand was Louis Vuitton, and the secondary entity with which Louis Vuitton had been associated for a quarter of a century was the America's Cup, which is a famous yachting race. And so you can click into this hyperlink and read about this association, which was very successful for a long period of time in terms of transferring secondary associations of the America's Cup to Louis Vuitton. But why Louis Vuitton decided to end that association, what they felt had gone wrong. And what they felt had gone wrong relates to the points that I was just talking about on this throne. Here we've got an issue, well, a number of issues about secondary associations illustrated on this rather messy but hopefully useful slide. So the panel at the top left, the panel at the top right, and the panel at the bottom right are all designed to illustrate to you that brands are often associated, or multiple brands are often associated with the same secondary entity. And so here we've got the interplay of the sponsors of championships, such as the Champions League, the World Cup, FIFA brand partners, with the sponsorship of individual football teams, such as Samsung sponsoring Chelsea, for example, or Chevrolet sponsoring Manchester United, or Etihad, and whatever. So it's not a direct, simple one-to-one relationship. And so when we view an event like Champions League on television, we can be bombarded with different brand logos, and it can be quite difficult then for any one brand to cut through that clutter. There's cue overload here. Lots of brands are giving us their cue and telling us that they are associated with what's going on. And how do we disentangle all of those cues? Very hard for any one brand to really stand out. And then the photograph at the bottom left of the screen, we'll be talking about this in a bit more depth and detail later. What happens when your secondary entity starts to misbehave, when something goes wrong, when there's a scandal or a crisis? And here's Suarez, the Uruguayan footballer, who was known for biting his opponents and sometimes even his own teammates. When he got angry, he bit. And there was incredible negative publicity around his behaviour, which spilled over or reflected on the brand that sponsored his team, and indeed any brand that he himself was an individual celebrity sponsor or supporter or endorser of. So it's quite complicated. You have to be careful. You have to try hard to cut through the clutter, and you have to hope that if your secondary entity is human, they continue to behave themselves. Okay, so let's think now about the properties that brand leveraging strategies could make use of. There are basically two. The first property is that of commonality, and this is where the brand and the secondary entity have a great deal in common. They are essentially the same. They have a strong common thread. So the example shown here is Barilla, which is a pasta brand from Italy, and Italy as the secondary entity. So pasta comes from Italy. Italy is famous for its pasta. Barilla is an Italian brand. And so the two go together like hand and glove. And that's showcased here in the use of the different pasta shapes to create a map of Italy in the advertisement. It can be quite hard, though, to find commonality in some brands. Not all brands have an entity that they have a great deal in common with. And so perhaps a more common strategy or property that is made use of is complementarity, where the brand and the secondary entity are not the same thing or not terribly closely related in a physical or real sense, but they complement one another. So we have Beyonce here being the face of L'Oreal Cosmetics, in this case, foundation. So the complementarity there is between Beyonce's beauty and the fact that L'Oreal Cosmetics are designed to make you look and feel more beautiful. This is an interesting example. In the UK, one of the major mobile phone networks is EE. And for a number of years now, their celebrity endorser has been the American actor Kevin Bacon, who's shown here. Now, the reason they chose Kevin Bacon is that if you go online and Google Kevin Bacon 6 degrees, you will find there's a game which has been around on the internet for many, many years, which tracks everybody in the world to Kevin Bacon through 6 connections or less. So it's Kevin Bacon and the 6 degrees of separation. Now, EE used that in choosing Kevin as their celebrity endorser because mobile phones are all about connections, making quick, secure, short connections. The trouble is, not many people know about this Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation. And increasingly, not very many people know Kevin Bacon. He's not acted in movies that much lately. He's not well known as an actor. And he's certainly not well known amongst the younger people who are the primary target customer for EE and new mobile phones. So you have to ask yourself, is there really good fit here? And are any meaningful secondary associations actually being transferred to EE as a result of using Kevin Bacon in their advertising? Okay, so let's start now working our way around our framework diagram. And we're going to start by looking at how a brand can link itself to other brands. Well, the company can do this itself through its own branding strategies. It can decide to adopt or to modify an existing brand name when it launches a new product, a brand extension. We'll look at brand extensions in much more depth and detail later on in the module. But for now, we can see that when Nivea wanted to move into sun care products, it decided to leverage the strength of the Nivea brand and create Nivea Sun as a brand extension. Didn't need to do that. It could have created a completely new standalone name with different brand elements, no use of the famous Nivea white and blue colours, etc. But very sensibly, Nivea decided, or the company rather, Beiersdorf, the owning company, decided to capitalise on the strength of Nivea. Very, very large awareness, strong recall, strong brand recognition, which gave its new range, or when they were first launched, new range of sun care products, a real flying start by tapping into and leveraging what the target customer already knew about Nivea. Quality products, gentle for all the family, gentle skincare. Perhaps a slightly different strategy might be used where a company decides to combine an existing with a new brand name when it's launching a new offering to the market. And this was done by Marriott Hotels. So Marriott is known for large resort type hotels or large 3 to 4 star business city centre hotels. Very large, lots of facilities, function rooms, ballrooms, etc. As the what they call in the US the lodging market and what we call in Europe the accommodation market changed, and many consumers were looking for lower price, no frills, no fancies, more straightforward budget offerings, Marriott felt that they needed to have a product in that growing segment of the market. But the Marriott name on its own wouldn't really work because it would be incongruous, because customers associated Marriott with high prices, with lots of facilities. However, they wanted to reassure the customer that this new budget hotel chain, Courtyard, was not just any old budget hotel chain, but came with the Marriott associations of cleanliness, quality, reliability, safety, etc. And so the customer service, the service experience would be of a decent quality, albeit at a lower price point. So combining the two names together, Courtyard by Marriott, signifies a new brand, Courtyard, but with the reassurance of the existing brand. Sometimes, however, those associations with existing brands do not fit the new venture. And if we look at the case of Purina, we can see that sometimes you need to branch out and create a completely new brand that you don't really have the opportunity to leverage any secondary associations. Now, the reason for that in this case is that Purina is owned by Nestlé, and Nestlé is known primarily as a manufacturer of food for humans. And so the kind of associations that we have with human food, and particularly Nestlé being very strong in the baby food market, simply do not transfer to pet food. We don't want to have the same associations for the food that our pet eats, with the food that we feed our baby or that we eat ourselves. And so you won't see any reference to Nestlé or to any of Nestlé's famous brands on Purina products. A completely new standalone brand was created, which had to build its own associations, but would leverage secondary associations in different ways, perhaps with associating with dog shows like Crufts. Another way in which companies themselves can leverage secondary associations is through brand licensing. And this involves a contractual arrangement whereby an organisation can pay to use brand elements, so a brand name, a brand logo, brand characters, etc., to put on their own merchandise. And they have to pay to do that, usually in the form of a fixed fee, sometimes only a fixed fee, sometimes a fixed fee plus commission each time there's a sale of merchandise with the brand name on it. And there are many brands from the worlds of entertainment, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, The Simpsons, from the world of fashion, Calvin Klein, who have licensed their brand names. Football teams do it, etc. And so you get merchandise, toys, clothing, furniture, accessories, manufactured using these brand elements. And so the secondary associations of The Simpsons are reflected on the rucksack or the pencil case or the t-shirt. But again, you have to be a bit careful. And the last brand name on this slide, Pierre Cardin, is a sad case of what was once an incredibly prestigious haute couture French designer fashion brand, who became rather greedy and over-licensed the brand name to a very wide range of merchandise, some of which was not very good quality. Things like relatively cheap sunglasses and belts and umbrellas, aftershave that was not particularly prestigious. And that brought in a lot of money for the Pierre Cardin brand to begin with. But then what happened was that the products that Pierre Cardin was associated with were not good quality, and those poor quality associations then reflected back on the Pierre Cardin brand and damaged its equity very considerably. So it was a kind of feedback loop, a negative feedback loop. Excuse me, couldn't speak there. So what started as an overt campaign through licensing to make money for Pierre Cardin, to bring in cash which could then be invested in the designer clothing, etc., actually ended up damaging the brand very, very much indeed, and it is now a shadow of its former self. Another way in which a company can leverage secondary associations with other brands is through what's known as co-branding, cooperative branding activities, buddying up with another brand. You would do this when there was some kind of logical, sensible fit between the two brands, either in their values, their philosophy, their mission, if you like, their capabilities, the type of things that they made and whether they fitted well together, and their goals. So a good example there would be Yo Crunch, yogurt with crunchy ingredients. Here using M&Ms as the crunchy ingredient. So you've got two brands co-branding, Yo Crunch and M&Ms. They have a perfect fit in capability. Yo makes the yogurt, M&Ms make the crunch. So it's a marriage, a brand, co-branding marriage made in heaven. And Yo has actually partnered with a range of famous brands of crunchy things. Here we can see Oreos as well. There needs to be an appropriate balance of brand equity for the co-branding to work. You don't want to have one super dominant brand and one very weak brand, because then the co-branding is unbalanced. It doesn't really bring benefit to the more dominant brand, and the weaker brand is simply overshadowed, so it doesn't really benefit either. And you can see here there is a pretty equal balance in terms of the size of the brand logos, the importance that they play, the awareness levels that the consumer has of the two components of this co-branding. Co-branding is not a casual thing, it's a formal thing covered by legal contracts, very specific financial terms and conditions, and very tightly defined and organised marketing arrangements, which govern things like the size of each logo on the packaging to give each brand an equal prominence and equal opportunity, who's going to pay for the advertising, who's going to pay for the joint packaging, etc. There are different types of co-branding. There are brand alliances between, for example, manufacturers of coffee makers and manufacturers of coffee brands coming together to create a brand alliance. So the coffee maker helps to sell the coffee, and the coffee helps to sell the coffee maker. So again, a marriage of convenience. There are so-called advertising partnerships. Often you find this with white goods, so-called white goods like dishwashers and washing machines, where they advertise in partnership with a leading brand of laundry detergent or dishwasher detergent, or whatever it happens to be. And again, the idea is to promote and to support each brand. So AEG being a well-known, reputable quality brand of white goods is saying, if you want a quality experience, use Finish in our dishwashers. And Finish are happy to be associated with a quality brand of dishwasher in return. So the associations of quality and a quality experience in using the dishwasher radiate and reflect from Finish to AEG and from AEG back to Finish in this partnership. And then there is ingredient branding. We saw that at the top of the screen with Yo Crunch and M&Ms, M&Ms being the ingredient, and Oreos. There are other examples of ingredients that are actually quite famous brands in their own right. Gore-Tex, for example, a waterproofing brand, which is used in manufacturing outdoor clothing, footwear, etc. And you can buy a branded rain jacket, say from North Face, which is a brand, which also has the Gore-Tex brand on it. So you're really getting the two brands. And North Face are telling you that this is not only is it a high quality North Face jacket, it is a high quality North Face jacket that uses the very high quality Gore-Tex waterproofing in its manufacture. So again, you're getting this reinforcement of quality. Many of our laptops have an Intel sticker, Intel inside. And again, that is to signify that the ingredient, the primary ingredient of the laptop, the all-important microprocessing chip, is not just any old chip, it is an Intel chip, a quality, reliable brand. So here, brand performance associations are being stressed through the use of these ingredients. The picture in the middle is a jar of Marmite. Marmite is a yeast spread. It's actually a byproduct of brewing, and it's spread on crackers and toast. It's a very salty, savoury taste, which you either love or you hate, and indeed that is the slogan of much Marmite's marketing activity. This particular jar of Marmite is special. Normally Marmite has a bright yellow plastic lid, the black jar and the yellow lid. Here we're seeing that Marmite have partnered with Guinness, the Guinness brand of beer, a particular kind of beer called Stout. And Guinness is a black beer which has a white creamy top on it. And so the colours, the associations are being carried through not only with the name Guinness written on the label, but by changing the colour of the lid of the jar from yellow to white. It looks like a glass of Guinness with that foam on the top. So you're getting the quality of Guinness, the special taste of Guinness as an ingredient in your Marmite. And Guinness being well known, very well known, high brand awareness, that may indeed attract more people to buy Marmite than otherwise would. So there are very strong, profound advantages of these sorts of co-branding arrangements that we've just been looking at. We can borrow needed expertise. North Face can borrow the phenomenal waterproofing power of the Gore-Tex brand. You can leverage brand equity that you don't have. You can bring in the equity of M&Ms to your yogurt with crunchy bits. You haven't got equity in crunchy bits that you need for your yogurt, so you can bring it in from somewhere else. You can reduce the cost of introducing a new product if you co-brand, because your partner can pay for some of the expenses, some of the marketing expenses, some of the promotional costs. And you can expand your brand meaning, perhaps into related product categories, broaden the meaning of the brand, or increase the access points of the brand for the consumer. An example there would be the coffee and coffee maker brand partnership, where you can have the coffee sold alongside coffee machines in the electrical and household goods parts of stores. And you can have information about the coffee makers and merchandising and point of sale material where the coffee is sold in supermarkets. So you're increasing the access for both. And of course, co-branding is a source of additional revenue. However, set against that, there are some very profound disadvantages of co-branding. You're losing control. Any kind of partnership, whether it is strategic alliance or a co-branding arrangement, as soon as you're buddying up and partnering with someone else, you're no longer in full control of your branding, your brand elements, and your marketing. And that loss of control can be detrimental to the positioning and the clarity and the consistency of brand positioning. There is a risk of brand equity dilution, most definitely, and that's what happened to Pierre Cardin when they licensed their brand to so many different types of products and were not careful enough to monitor the quality of those products. And therefore you can get negative feedback effects. The co-branding arrangement can mean that there becomes a lack of focus on the main brand itself. You're concentrating on other things, you're starting to think more about your co-branding partner, and you lose focus and clarity on your own brand positioning. It could be seen potentially, therefore, as some kind of organizational distraction. However, co-branding is very popular, and if managed properly, then the advantages can definitely outweigh the disadvantages. Okay, so we've looked at other brands. Let's, a bit more quickly now, look at places, how brands can associate themselves with places to leverage secondary associations. Country of origin is a good place to start because places, geographical countries or cities can often be used directly to associate with a brand to create a certain personality and character. And we're going back to Italy and pasta here, where many brands make a great play of their Italian provenance. We looked at Barilla earlier. There's also Napolina and Dolmio, who come across as strongly Italian. Marks and Spencer, on the other hand, showcase the word London as a sub, underneath their brand, associating strongly with the UK as their country of origin. Sometimes brands deliberately say where they are made in France, made in Italy, because those countries have strong positive associations. And sometimes brands talk about and make much of in their brand positioning their heritage, how long they have been around in a particular country. So we can see here Hovis, which is a brand of bread that goes back to the 1900s in the UK and uses Edwardian, late Victorian and Edwardian imagery in its advertising. In the middle, we've got the Ben Sherman clothing brand, which not only here is stressing its British origin, but also a kind of 1960s Carnaby Street mod type heritage. And then there are brands like Jaguar and Land Rover that aren't actually British anymore, but still try to leverage strong secondary associations with the UK, with Britishness by sponsoring British sporting events and so on. And there's a hyperlink to read more about these brands and why they're not British anymore, what has happened to them. So country of origin can be very important because countries have associations themselves. For example, Germany. Germany is strongly associated with engineering excellence. And in fact, there is a nation brand index, the Anhalt GfK or Anhalt Ipsos Roper Nation Brand Index, which measures the world's perception of each nation. And Germany was ranked the best overall country brand in the most recent Nation Brand Index 2019. And also, if we look at the Interbrand Top 100 global brands, in 2019, 8 of the top 100 are German brands, which is quite a strong showing from any one country. That is, however, down from 10 in 2008. So when we think of Germany, we think of dependability, reliability, engineering excellence. And indeed, this is used by Citroën here, the French car brand, made in France, but unmistakably German. Showing that there is German engineering going into this car, even though it is a French brand and it's made in France. So country of origin is important potentially to a brand. If your brand comes from a country which has positive associations in relation to the brand's product category, then it makes absolute sense to play that up. However, what if the country doesn't have strong positive associations for the product category? For example, would you think it would be a good thing to buy Indian microchips? Is India known for microchip manufacture? Cambodian trainers, bullet trains from Italy, Spanish fashion clothing. Well, actually, you do buy all of these, you just might not know it. So India manufactures a very large number of microchips for different companies that go into different products all over the world. Both Nike and Adidas have their trainers manufactured in Cambodia. Bombardier is an Italian company that makes most of the world's fast bullet trains. And Inditex is a leading player in the high street fashion sector with brands. It's a Spanish company. It has brands like Zara and so on, other brands. So the thing about all of these organizations is that they do not play on their country of origin. Nike and Adidas do not tell consumers that the trainers are made in Cambodia. You have to go online and Google around to find that, because there are not strong positive associations between Cambodia and the manufacture of trainers. Inditex, as we'll see shortly, actually goes at lengths to make people think that it's not Spanish. So you don't have to play up your country of origin effects, but if they are relevant to your brand, then you should. What links all of these brands? What do you think? Well, they all sort of seem to come from somewhere. So Cobra beer looks Indian, it uses Indian script. Neutrogena Norwegian formula hand cream seems to come from Norway. Massimo Dutti, since 1985, is a very Italian sounding clothing brand, and so on and so forth. And the top right is a Panama hat, more of that in a minute. What actually links all of these brands together is that they don't come from where they claim to come from. Häagen-Dazs is not some Scandinavian or Swiss or Central European ice cream brand. It's a completely made up name from the United States. Neutrogena is based in California, and Massimo Dutti is a brand of Inditex, the Spanish fashion company. Cobra beer is British. Bailey's Irish cream isn't Irish. Alpen isn't from the Swiss Alps, it's from the UK. And the Panama hat actually isn't from Panama, that is also from the UK. So what I'm trying to signify and show you here is that you can cleverly and legally create a brand which has the association of coming from somewhere, even if it doesn't. There's absolutely nothing illegal about this. The brand is not saying, or the company is not saying that the products are manufactured in a particular place, and they're giving the associations of a particular country. Also, in places, we can look at channels of distribution and how a particular retailer or type of store or a particular named retailer might be very useful as a secondary entity to link to. Net-a-Porter and Barney's, two well-known names in the luxury fashion sector. If your clothing brand or your accessories brand can get distribution in those types of retailers, that is worth a great deal, because each of these retailers has very, very strong positive associations of exclusivity, desirability, prestige, luxury, which can be leveraged onto the brands that are distributed by them. At the other end of the market, Carphone Warehouse, now no longer standalone stores, but part of other stores, but still a strong, well-known brand with high awareness in the UK as a one-stop shop to go and look at all sorts of different kinds of mobile phone handsets from all of the main network providers, Vodafone, EE, etc. Similarly, Foot Locker, a global brand, a footwear retailer, and brands that get into Foot Locker are lucky because Foot Locker itself is well known and trusted to offer a wide range of quality brands, good advice, opportunities to try the product on, to return it if you don't like it, etc. So those strong positive associations spill over onto the brands that are stored and stocked by Foot Locker. However, sometimes secondary associations between a distributor and a brand are not desirable and don't work positively in favour of the brand. And the example shown at the bottom right of the screen here is a case of grey marketing or parallel trading from a few years ago in the UK, where Tesco, the supermarket chain, was selling Levi 501 red tab jeans for a very, very low price, considerably below the recommended retail price. And Tesco were not an authorised distributor. So Levi's took Tesco to court and they won their court case. The lawyers were able to convince the court that by being sold in Tesco, Levi's brand equity was being damaged, and therefore the company's intellectual property was being damaged by Tesco. So no fit, no commonality, no complementarity there between the Tesco brand and the Levi 501 brand. And Levi's worked very, very hard to make sure that their product was no longer sold in Tesco stores. Okay, let's look now at people. Sometimes brands leverage their employees. They want to showcase and make a great deal of the skill of their employees, their commitment, their expertise, their personality, and so on. And we've got two examples here. On the left, we have Howard Brown, an employee of Halifax Bank in the UK, who became very, very famous when he appeared in and even sang in a long-running series of television advertisements for the bank. He became the face of Halifax, but he was originally an employee. On the right, we've got the staff of a Bridgestone tyre store in the USA. And you can see here that there's no attempt made to glamorize them. They're there in all of the different shapes and sizes with their facial hair and their tattoos, some thin, some portly, some young, some old, all different ethnic groups, etc. They're all men, no women. But nonetheless, the idea here is that this is every man. Bridgestone is a brand of tyre for anyone, for everyone. You will be looked after by all of these good, reliable, regular guys when you have your tyres changed. Now we come on to not the everyday employee, but the famous celebrity. This is a very commonly used form of secondary association leverage, where brands choose celebrities to be their face, to endorse them in public. The rationale, of course, is because the celebrity is famous, they draw attention to the brand. The celebrity may be very beautiful, may be very successful, maybe a wonderful actor, maybe a famous sports person, and their expertise, their charm, their style, their skill, their fame can rub off onto the brand. What we know about the celebrity, we then impute that knowledge across or infer that knowledge across to the brand. Again, of course, there are guidelines, and it all comes back to this concept of fit that we mentioned earlier. Sometimes the term congruence is used in the literature. There needs to be a good fit between the brand and the celebrity, but also there needs to be a good fit between the brand's target customer and the celebrity. Remember EE and Kevin Bacon? I contend that that doesn't work because the primary target market for EE is younger adults aged about 16 to 25, and they don't know Kevin Bacon. Also, as we saw already, with Q overload, there is a concept of celebrity overload, where the celebrity has associated themselves with not just your brand, but with other brands. And you have to be careful of that because your brand won't necessarily cut through all of that clutter. And of course, the main task is to highlight the relevant associations between the celebrity and the brand and to encourage their transfer. So let's look at some examples. Andy Murray and Castore clothing. George Clooney and Nespresso. Beyonce and Pepsi. Andy Wimbledon again, a bit older, with from the further back in time, in 2013 when he finally won Wimbledon for the first time, and Adidas. And Uber Eats and Love Island, and the celebrity there being any one of the participants of Love Island at any point in time. So you can see here that there are different types of celebrity being used, and therefore different characteristics of the celebrity which are intended to transfer to the brand. With George Clooney, it's elegance, it's being that refined, glamorous, chic actor. And with Andy Murray, it's expertise, his tennis expertise, and so on. Here we've got David Beckham. I'm sure you've all heard of David Beckham and seen David Beckham on television and so on and so forth. This is just a very small sample of all of the different sorts of brands that David Beckham has associated himself with over the years. Mobile phones, Vodafone, Samsung, Motorola, Gillette, different watch brands, food brands such as Pepsi, Young's Fish Fingers, and there are many, many more. Believe me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I put a hyperlink at the bottom to an article about David Beckham and Lionel Messi to see who has earned the most from brand endorsement. The point I'm making here is that you do have to be careful. Have any one of these brands really got maximum value from David Beckham when he is known as the face of Vodafone or the face of Motorola? Does that really help Samsung? When he's the face of Young's Fish Fingers, does that really help Tag Heuer luxury watches? And so on. So there's conflict here and there's potential confusion. Of course, these did not all occur at exactly the same point in time. But as I say, there are many, many, many more examples. And David Beckham has really associated himself with a large number of brands. And you begin to wonder whether any one of them really got value for the sponsorship, the endorsement fees that Beckham earned. And then back to misbehaving. Earlier in the session, we looked at Luis Suarez and what happened when he bit his opponents on the football field, and the backlash, the negative publicity that created for brands that were associated with him and with his football team. And here are three more examples of sporting heroes whose fortunes changed. So on the left-hand side, we have Tiger Woods. Now in 2020, as I'm recording this, Tiger Woods is on the ascendant again. He's come back to health, to fitness and strength, and has put behind him his personal difficulties. But there was a time where his private life was very, very messy. He was in court for driving under the influence of alcohol. He cheated on his wife and she divorced him. And he lost at least $20 million in cancelled endorsement contracts, such as shown here for Accenture Management Consultants. No brand wants to be associated with a sportsman whose private life is in disgrace, in disarray, and who is no longer successful at his chosen sport. Fortunately, as I say, Tiger Woods has put all his troubles behind him and is back on track. Not so the other two celebrities. On the right-hand side, on the top, we've got Lance Armstrong, who was a cyclist, a very famous one, but was found to be a drug cheat and had all of his medals, all of his titles stripped away from him. He was the face of Oakley sunglasses for many years, but he lost $50 million in endorsement contracts. And the image at the bottom is a bit blurry and you may not be able to see it super clearly, but the brand is Nike. The strap line is the I am the bullet in the chamber, and it shows a para athlete running on artificial limbs, on blades, coming out of the starting blocks, exploding out of the starting blocks at the start of a sprint race. Unfortunately for Nike, the athlete in question is Oscar Pistorius, and not long after this poster was used in advertising in many countries around the world, Oscar Pistorius was found guilty of shooting to death his partner, his girlfriend, in their flat in South Africa, and is now in prison. And I bet Nike wish they had never used the strapline, I am the bullet in the chamber. But unfortunately, the advertisements are out there. That cannot be taken away. Those negative associations cannot be recalled and cannot be undone. So when you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with fallible creatures who make mistakes, who have problems, and that can create enormous problems for the brands that they associate themselves with. Our final category are things. Things like events and charitable causes, and then third-party endorsements. So brands can associate themselves with events, and that is often referred to as sponsorship. So sponsorship, or its other name, event marketing, refers to the corporate funding of events or activities such as sporting events, Formula One races, art exhibitions, entertainment like the theatre, or perhaps social causes. Now you need to be careful here and to differentiate sponsorship, so here we have Marlboro cigarettes sponsoring Formula One, from celebrity endorsement. Sponsorship is where it is an event which is associated with a brand. Celebrity endorsement is where an individual is associated with a brand. So here we have Lewis Hamilton, the Formula One driver, becoming the face of Tag Heuer watches. That's celebrity endorsement, not sponsorship. So make sure you understand the difference between them. Evaluating sponsorship is quite tricky. How do you know if it's worked? How do you know what effect the sponsorship has had on your brand? There needs to be a fit between the brand and the event in the first place. There needs also, like with celebrity endorsement, to be a fit between the target market for the brand and the event. The way that sponsorship effectiveness is measured is by measuring awareness of the brand before the event and the sponsorship, and then awareness after the event, and hoping to see an increase. So the fact that the brand name has been seen around the event on posters, on merchandising, etc., in advertising, should increase brand awareness. Also, market research surveys can be done to measure what people think of the brand image, the reputation of the brand, again, before and after the sponsorship event. And the intention would be that the image would strengthen in a positive manner, the reputation would also strengthen in a positive manner. Sponsorship effectiveness can also be measured by measuring the number of network relationship partners that are brought in as a result of the sponsorship event. So, for example, events that a brand sponsors are often used for corporate hospitality, a means of entertaining new clients or potential clients, prospective clients. And if after the sponsorship some of those have been converted to be actual clients, then that is a measure of the success of the sponsorship activity. And of course, sales revenue. How much has the brand sold before the sponsorship, per week, per month? How much does it sell afterwards? Again, you would expect to see an uplift in sales associated with the sponsorship activity. The larger the event, the more the sales uplift is likely to be. So very large sponsorship events like sponsoring the Olympics. Brands have to pay enormous sums of money to be an Olympic brand sponsor because the potential for sales uplift is so huge. The Olympic events are witnessed or viewed or shown on television, live, etc., all around the world. Sometimes you can leverage a special event, a one-off. Many brands in the UK and indeed in other countries in the world tapped into the most recent royal wedding between the Duke and Duchess of Sussex back in 2018, the Harry and Meghan wedding. And you can see some examples here with Marmite putting their names on special edition jars, and Tyrrell's potato crisps, vegetable crisps, introducing the ginger and sparkle. Sparkle rhyming with Markle, which was Meghan's maiden name before she married Prince Harry. Leveraging causes can be very effective for a brand and is increasingly important as customers place great store on brands' corporate social responsibility record and their ethics. A very good example here is Tom's. Tom's is a brand of casual canvas shoes, and social responsibility is really hardwired into the DNA of the brand. It was part of the brand from the very start. Every time someone buys a pair of Tom's shoes, the company gives a pair of shoes to somebody in need in a part of the world, such as Africa or parts of Latin America. And there's a hyperlink at the bottom to find out more about Tom's. Then we have Project Red, the Global Fund, charitable fund, which was set up many years ago by, among others, Bono from U2, to raise money for HIV/AIDS, to raise awareness, to fund healthcare campaigns, to provide money for condoms to be used in high-risk parts of the world, etc. And Red partners with brands all the time, and each time a special edition Red branded product is sold, money is raised for the Global Fund. And you can see here Gap and Starbucks with their Red branded products. And this also happens in business-to-business marketing world. I'm very conscious that all of the examples really that I've talked about so far primarily have been business to consumer, but all of these principles of secondary associations apply to business brands too. And here we can see Intel partnering with the Michael J. Fox Foundation to raise money for Parkinson's disease research. Michael J. Fox is the actor who himself suffers from Parkinson's and has been very, very instrumental in raising funds for research into that condition. And finally, third-party sources can be leveraged to provide secondary associations, to provide a seal of approval. Fair trade, to show that a product has ethical ingredients. The Soil Association, to show that a product is organic. Third-party sources can endorse a product. Leading magazines like Best Buy, Which, Good Housekeeping can endorse products and brands to provide their seal of approval. JD Power is an organisation that measures customer satisfaction. And here is an advertisement where Apple have done very well in a JD Power customer satisfaction survey, and they're capitalising that by showing a phone with a smiley face and a little halo. Organisations such as Great Taste or Best of Scotland endorse products to show their provenance and their quality. And experts, doctors, scientists can be used to endorse products, but you have to be careful. In some parts of the world, they don't actually have to be real experts. They can be actors who are pretending. More of that when we look at marketing ethics or ethics in branding in a later session. So that's all from the topic of leveraging secondary associations. Our next topic is marketing programs. We will look at the elements of the operational marketing mix, the product itself, pricing and distribution channels, and then in a follow-up session, integrated marketing communications. So your compulsory reading for next time is shown here. But for now, that's all. Goodbye.